I'm Danny Hirschtal, and this is Different Thinking. Today I want to look at a Bible verse and look at two first century interpretations of this verse and see how each of these interpretations has expanded over time to diverge into two completely different and even contradictory philosophies. The full verse that I'm talking about is Leviticus 19:18, which says, "Do not take revenge, do not begrudge, and love your friend as yourself. I am the Lord." And this verse has become famous and known philosophically as what's called the Golden Rule. But the meaning of the verse and the practical implications are interpreted differently by two of the most famous first century theologians. One of the most famous stories of the Talmud is that of an audacious Gentile who challenges the chief judge of Israel at the time, Shammai, saying that he will convert to Judaism if he can be taught all of the Torah, all of the Bible, while standing on one leg. Shammai sees this person as mocking him and basically throws him out of his office. But then the same man challenges Hillel the elder, who is the president of the academy that basically made the rules for the Jewish society at the time. And Hillel tells the man to stand on one leg and tells him, "That which you hate, do not do to any other." And the rest of the Torah is simply an explanation of this. Now go and learn it. Impressed, the man takes his conversion seriously and ends up converting and becoming a very learned Jew. The other interpretation of the Golden Rule comes from the famous Sermon on the Mount, which is recounted in the Gospel of Matthew, specifically in Matthew 7:12, where it says, "Do unto others that which you would want they do unto you." And that's, the common English translation of the Golden Rule. Now, what you might have noticed is that the verse in Matthew focuses on the end of the verse, of positively showing love to your neighbor by doing unto others. Whereas Hillel focuses on the first part of the verse, which prohibits vengeful behavior and holding a grudge. And so he interprets the idea of loving friends as a lack of action, right? Do not perform actions that you would hate, that's something that you would hate having done to you. The difference is subtle, and in a sense, I would assume that both Hillel and Matthew would certainly have taken similar views on most actions performed by individuals towards others, for good or for bad. But as centuries passed, the Golden Rule was adopted by almost all cultures as a social imperative, meaning that not only should individuals live by the Golden Rule, but that society has a responsibility to protect those who keep the Golden Rule and punish those who break it. Now, before we get into a religious debate, the examples that I use of Hillel as a Jewish rabbinic hero versus Jesus and Matthew, who were of the same era but clearly anti-rabbinic and eventually Christian, is not really the point, since both Jewish and Christian thinkers of later generations each adopted both of these philosophies. So it can't be said that one version is completely Jewish and the other is completely Christian. But what happens when you take each interpretation of the rule and extend it to a society? So let's take the Hillel view first. So on one hand, this is a very negative view, right? You're only thinking about those things that would hate you, that you would hate done to you, that would aggravate you, that would make you upset, and then preventing yourself from doing this to other people. What this essentially creates is a society where you're avoiding interference and trying to prevent harm as much as possible. But it leads to somewhat of a disconnect in society, right? There's, the famous thing that we all learned in kindergarten, that if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything. Often, so when you're trying to avoid saying anything mean about others or something mean to someone else, you end up, not speaking to them at all and curtailing a lot of your speech and your thought to yourself. But of course, the idea of preventing harm to others and preventing harm from coming to yourself is sort of the driving philosophy of many famous philosophers like Thomas Hobbes, who really saw the prevention of violent death and the prevention of war and strife between people and between nations as the key building block to a society. John Locke, of course, who had his famous letter on toleration, and the entire theory of his philosophy was that people should live as individually free as possible, and not just free as in the national sense of avoiding war and avoiding being subjugated to other nations, but should live free as individuals as much as possible. John Locke, of course, was the spiritual teacher, spiritual mentor of Thomas Jefferson, and of course of James Madison as well, who really enshrined these ideas in the Constitution, specifically in the Bill of Rights, where Madison wrote the Bill of Rights specifically in a negative sense, right? The idea that Congress shall make no law, etc., etc. The idea that we're not going to do things that would infringe on people's rights. We're not going to do certain actions that we would find hateful to ourselves. And that's the kind of society that sort of comes out of the Hillel view. Now we can look and see what happens if the Matthew view is extended to a more societal view. We have philosophers, again, who adopted this view, like Voltaire, Rousseau, Hegel. All of these believed that the purpose of a government, of a society, is to create a social cohesion. And the only way you can have a really just society is to have people to have social cohesion and equality under the law, but to have a certain sense of law that applies to all people. Hegel was very, very much talked about the idea of rights and duties being two sides of the same coin. That a person has, in order to receive rights from a society, has certain obligations to the society as well, certain obligations to those around him. And Rousseau also talks about the idea of willing subjugation, right? The idea that laws should be created by a democracy, by the people who are actually going to be ruled by those laws. But the idea is that you are still ruled by social laws and social constructs, and therefore you're sort of giving willing subjugation, right? You're subjugating yourself to laws, but those are laws that you yourself created or at least voted for through yourself or through representatives. So you can see that both of these ideas can be presented in a very freedom-loving, democratic way, but the idea is that in one sense we have the idea of people should stay out of each other's way, and basically the best way for society to progress is to only punish those who get in each other's way and to create laws only to prevent people from having conflicting rights. Whereas the other side, the Matthew side of the coin, is to say that no, it's important that people have a social connection to each other, and actually, in order to have a just society, you have to reach out and do things for others. You have to have certain obligations to your neighbor and to your society, and of course those neighbors and society has that similar obligation to you, and that sort of meshing of duties is what creates a just society, and of course when the obligations and the willingness to perform actions for other people comes out of a willing subjugation, where the people themselves decide what rules the society should live by. So the question is, what do you think of these philosophies, and where do you see yourself on this scale? Are you a Matthew or a Hillel?